the Mindset Athlete Podcast, and I'm your host, James Roberts. I'm a two-time Paralympian and owner of James Robert Fitness, which is an online training, nutrition, and mindset coaching business. And each week on the Mindset Athlete, we like to bring you inspirational athletes, a message, or experts talking about human optimization to teach you how to change your perception of your mindset and become 1% better. I'm coming again to you solo this week, unfortunately due to technical difficulties. I had originally planned to put out an episode either with Jamie Gain or Grant Parr this week, but due to unforeseen technical difficulties, like I said, this has not been the case, so I thought I would do a episode by myself. Obviously, those two episodes I will look to reschedule and bring them to you at a later date, so do stay tuned for both of those episodes. A little bit backing information for both of those guests, so it gives you a chance to see if you want to listen to either of those. For a little bit of backing information for Jamie Gain, he is an adaptive athlete in both judo, obstacle course racing, and throwing sports. His interest in sports first began when he joined the Army Cadet Force in 2008, and then he went on to represent his organization and on a bigger picture representing his country. And as we were talking this week, he had recently come back from the European Championships out in Poland, and we were discussing the fact that there is no classification type scenario around the fact that individuals need to qualify, the same case being as an able-bodied person. So that is a topic that is of great importance that I would like to bring to you at a later date. And with regards to Grant Parr, he is the author of the book The Next One Up Mindset, How to Prepare for the Unknown. He's also a keynote speaker and mental performance coach. And also, he hosts his own show called 90% Mental Podcast. So we're in I'll give you like a brief synopsis of what we spoke about. It's very much heavily around the mental aspect of an athlete and how do you actually prepare for the unknown. For him, it was the case being that he played American football. He later in his career got injured and took a hiatus of 20 years away from the game, obviously due to, I'll use the term hatred, because obviously he'd given so much to the sport and then he's dealt this massive blow and kind of taken away from him. So that one, obviously, those are two episodes that I have let them both know. I appreciate them taking their time out of their busy schedules to come on and record it in the first place. And I look to salvage in one case or another bits of those episodes and make them bonus content at a later date, and obviously bring you the original format of what that was going to be originally, and then go from there. So in today's episode, instead, it is going to be just me, and I am going to talk to you a little bit about my how would I put it into words? Circumstances around sport as well, because and open up and be a little bit as vulnerable as I can in terms of the time in my career where necessarily the coaching staff had how would I put this into words, a certain stereotype that they wanted to put into materialization, be it, I'm going to use probably specifically the time in my rowing career, be it they had a envisioned type of athlete that they wanted, be it somebody that was 6 foot plus tall and weighed about, in British terminology, what would it be? about 15 stone. So I'm 11 stone at a push, which is 70 kilos. So it'd be about 140 pounds for everybody listening in the US. So they would be looking at an athlete that is probably nearing 200 kilos and about, not 200 kilos, about over 100 kilos and about probably 200, 250. So something that you would envision probably American football player or something like that, in terms of that's the athlete that they wanted to put in for my discipline of, obviously at that time, Paralympic rowing. So you may ask, well, what was my mindset when that actually occurred? Well, this is a difficult one because, and I was asked to describe what kind of motivates you to keep pushing forward when you actually endure an obstacle or adversity or however you want to call it. But I think for me, it was, quote unquote, yes, it is an obstacle because in no uncertain terms, I don't fit that mold that they wanted, that ideology that they envisioned that the athlete had to be successful. But I think what spurred me on, and you could say this is to a certain extent an external motivator, it's to prove somebody wrong. Well, why do I have to conform to that mold of being that particular athlete? I'm going to prove to you that I can be this different kind of mold and be successful. So to a certain extent, yes, that was an external motivator, but I would obviously like to envision that I also had a great sense of belief in myself to succeed. Okay, I did obviously have people in my corner to support that way of thinking, to keep me on the straight and narrow, to be positive, be it my family, my coaching staff within the sport within Wales, so Disability Sport Wales, what's the organisation called? Rowing Wales, and have people in my corner to say, well, if we can get you to be the best athlete that you can be, irrespective of those ceilings being put on yourself, you can be successful. But so I think when adversity does strike, you don't quite fit the mold. You could put it into uncertain terms. You're not quite tall enough. You're not quite quick enough. What do you do when that scenario presents itself? You can either shy away from it or tackle it head on. So, okay, in my case I took it on head on and rolled with it and kind of moved forward to kind of want to be successful. It was an avenue I had to cross because it was an obstacle that was put in my way, but I envisioned successes beyond the national team. It was to strive to, and I talk about this in a process type of way, be it they were kind of stepping stones. It be I wanted to make the team. I wanted to then make the next major championship. So okay, for us in that occasion, that circumstance was the World Championships. The next avenue represented itself, the Paralympics. And I think because I don't talk about this in the light of day, okay, it's very difficult because I'm reframing it and reflecting on memories. So it is difficult to put into words what do you do when that circumstance and kind of a certain uncontrollable state does arise, because obviously if a coach has a certain perception, a certain person that they want to go with, how do you facilitate and position yourself to look so they look at you in a different light? So I think with me, it probably did help that I moved locations because the coaching staff are able to see you day in, day out. And I think maybe what, I won't say hindered my progress before that, was because of my personality, even to this day, is quite laid back, and you probably can tell from how I'm talking. I'm quite easygoing in terms of, in the sporting realm, and there's probably people listening to this can very much relate. When it does come across at times that you can be perceived as lazy, you don't care, and I'm going to loosely kind of swear here, you couldn't give a shit, in terms of that is the aura that you give off. Whereas if I put it from a different perspective, and I do talk about it occasionally, well, if I didn't think in terms of that mind frame that I was lazy, I couldn't care, or I couldn't give a shit altogether, why would I put my body through that day in, day out? So I think you do need to think of it from the perspective of the other person. You could use the analogies of looking at it through their perspective, walking in their shoes, and obviously you could say, well, that way you're acting does give off that illusion. But obviously when they can see the work rate that you put in, and you can talk about it from this perspective of, you call it whatever you want to call it, put in the work, grind harder than somebody else, putting in the hours more than another individual to put you in that position. But obviously that is a process. But so it does, okay, those are all physical attributes, doing more than anybody is doing at that particular time. Kobe Bryant talked about putting in workout rates, be it doing it first thing in the morning, but obviously practicing at school, and then practicing late at night, and then building his rest and recovery around that. So yes, from one perspective, yes, you could do that. But in terms of where I am coming from, it is a mental shift that you may have to take, because if you take on board this illusion that is being presented in front of you, be it per se, you're not fast enough, you're not tall enough, you're not strong enough, and you take that on board, you're going to start questioning yourself. Whereas where I'm coming from, because that inner belief was so strong, I kind of didn't care. I would gloss over the fact that, well, you're telling me I don't fit the mould. Well, let me go and prove to you that doesn't matter. I'm going to do it anyway. So you could say that it is this notion that I said at the very beginning of the show, that is trying to prove somebody wrong. Yes, on the one hand, yeah, that is correct. But on the other, is this notion that you're going to do it anyway. You're going to do it for you. It is a not necessarily a self-motivator, but it is, and I'm going to loosely use these three words together. It comes back to, obviously, you're passionate in what you're doing. So at the end of the day, I'm going to steal this quote again. The film is more than a game. You obviously love what you're doing, firstly. Secondly, you are dedicated to what you're doing, so you're going to do it no matter what the reward is, because generally the external motivator in any sport is the prize at the end of it, be it the trophy, the medal, the accolades, you name it, etc. And then obviously, finally, the obsession. And this is where I think from an outward perspective, I think athletes can relate to it, because they don't necessarily see the downside, the pitfall, or the negativity that the word associates itself with. Whereas I think from an outward perspective, people look at it as bad, because it's like, well, if you're obsessive with something, it takes over your life. Whereas I think from an athletic perspective, the obsession lies in the synchronicities, in terms of you're wanting to get not everything perfect, but you want to get every ounce of effort out of yourself. And if you can get those three to work on a tangent with each other, and this is probably where, when I use the three words, I see no difference between them, because it comes down to the initial factor of you are doing it not for what the sport is going to bring you, but you're doing it for the enjoyment factor. You could care less about everything else that comes with it. Okay, you could argue, well, James, how do you progress up the ladder if you do not have a carrot to strive to, a goal to accomplish? I'm not saying don't obviously use those as little bit of motivation along the way, because there's going to be times where your own motivation doesn't quite cut it, because we all know, depending on where you live, this is more difficult than others. The winter months are sometimes difficult to get yourself out of bed to go to practice. Some sports more difficult than others. Obviously, the late mornings, the early mornings, should I say, with swimmers. The summer workouts with basketball, American football, probably more so American football, but those hard grind sessions that you know you're going to have to endure to make a team, and you just can't quite motivate yourself. Okay, that's maybe where you want to employ an external motivator to give you an impetus to keep pressing on. And you kind of go between a growth mindset and a fixed one, and there's no problem probably going between the two. Okay, you don't want to kind of sway too much probably towards a fixed mindset, because you're going to get stuck in a rut. But obviously, if you went the flip side of that and always wanted to grow and wanted to better yourself, so be it studying film, analysing your opponent to a T, and this is obviously where obsession comes into it, you are wanting to work more than somebody else is willing to do, obviously you're going to be successful in that light. So coming back to my overriding point in terms of not letting, obviously, I'm not going to say stereotype, but what is commonplace within, well, everybody's sport within Great Britain, not having an impact on my career going forward. How did I do it? I took it on board. This is what you stereotypically envision will work in Paralympic sport. I didn't agree, probably because I knew no better from that perspective. And I had a curiosity of probably seeing what was to come, because it was a new sport for me. I'd never gone near a rowing boat, never picked up a rowing blade in my entire life up until that point. But I loved it. It was speaking to a client more recently about it. This love of being at one with nature. It kind of, I can't put into words in terms of what it brings you. It brings you happiness. Obviously helps with your mood in terms of when the sun's out. It gives you those properties, and you are obviously getting vitamins that's going to help you. But it's that sense of freedom. It didn't matter what time of the year it was for me. I enjoyed, to some degree, going to training every single day. I know, like I was talking about, there's going to be hard days that you don't want to get out of bed. Those are generally would obviously in that sport being indoors. It's not nice because you don't get the sun, but case in point, being the winter months, it wouldn't really matter because the sun isn't at its highest, so you're not getting as much of the benefits as you would be, say, this time of the year, obviously in the northern hemisphere. And I do apologise to people listening in the southern hemisphere. It would be the complete opposite in terms of this time of the year for you guys, but you do get that satisfaction that you are getting a push, a bit of a bonus. It's like that warm glow on the back of your neck. It feels nice. So I think it strives to make you want to push that much more in terms of the progressing. But I think coming back to your overriding point, it comes down to, I think, this overriding factor. You shouldn't care what other people think. If you want to do it anyway. It is what it is. It doesn't matter if it's in the athletic realm, the real world, how we want to call it. There is always going to be naysayers out there that say you can't do it. There's not necessarily you have to do it their way, your way. There is going to be a way, and finding that flexibility and adaptability to any scenario that it does arise. And it's trying to look at it from that perspective when adversity does present itself. And I think if we do look at it from those perspectives and not put limitations on ourselves, be it the coins of pessimism to a certain extent, be it I can't, and you will all have heard this, I can't, I won't, I don't, and it kind of puts a stopper on your ability to be able to do something, because you are, by all sense and purposes, putting limitations on yourself, because you start replaying that over and over again like a tape recorder, CD. Even we'll have to update this to a certain extent to a modern sense, be it Spotify or any app that you will listen to music. You listen to something over and over again, it sorts of brainwashes you. You get accustomed to being able to replay, put something on repeat without even thinking about it. Whereas you think of it from a mental perspective, what harm can that do to you? Going forward, it's going to be very detrimental. Whereas if we put of it in terms of actually a different one, and I learned this by speaking to Will Burns quite recently, if we use the law of transmutation and actually start using what I've used in this whole entire episode, turning a negative into a positive, we actually start using words as you aren't ready yet, or not just yet. I think you put yourself in a better position than, like I was talking about, if you were very dismissive of yourself, of not fitting a mold that somebody else is putting onto you, be it they are putting their beliefs into you, they are shining a light, however you want to call it, on their ideology, where you might not actually be able to communicate it, to say, well, I don't agree. And sometimes, obviously, from a sporting perspective, you can't do that, because you can't question the authority of a coach, because that's going to undermine his authority, and you're going to be even put in a worse position than you probably currently are, in terms of if you aren't perceived in that certain light, that you're not as quick as somebody, you're not as tall, and they don't think because you have those limitations, you might not be able to live up to expectation of being able to play at that certain position or compete in that certain sport. Whereas if we looked at it from a perspective of, and I'm going to use this example of going from a naturalistic point of view now, in terms of how would you look at things from this perspective, which actually has a greater impact on the other? And let me ask you this, and you guys can think this over in your head. You obviously pause it and have a sense of to reflect on this actual. It's not a quote, but in terms of question that I'm asking of you, which has a greater impact on the other? Does the sky make the sea blue, or on the other hand, does the sea make the sky blue? And I'll leave that for you to ponder over and make your own observations, own thought process as which has a greater impact on the other. And if you can relate that to yourself when these do actually occur, these adversity problems and things, what has a greater impact on you going forward? I think that it actually gets you to take a step back and be very reflective as opposed to be very confrontational, because you will look at it from a perspective of what you could say enlightenment to a certain extent. I'm not going to go all guru from that perspective, but it enables you to look at a certain circumstance from a different light. Because I could have gone at it, and I'm going to kind of wrap up the episode now, I could have looked at it very differently than I did. And this would have been, about 13 years ago. I could have been very bullish in terms of, well, you think this, I think this is total BS. That's very discriminatory towards me. Okay, I was heavily going into a predominantly white sport, but that aside, it is what it is. Because I was the new kid on the block, obviously for the older audience listeners, there's no connection to the boy band, obviously. With me in my 30s, that would be very much. For the younger ones, from that perspective, it's going in. You don't want to be that aggressive in terms of that. You want to take a step back. You want to prove that from a physical standpoint, you can live up to being the smaller person. And I'm going to say, metaphorically, obviously, being the bigger man. But you want to obviously try and beat that person in every component that you best can. So be it from my perspective, I look to, I'm not going to say destroy the person in every facet of the word, but okay, I did it in the case, be it whatever trial we had, be it on the water, in the gym, I look to put some distance between me. So if there was any circumstance that arose, height was not a factor. You were not going to get within touching distance of me. So if it was close on any call, we can't go back to case in point. Well, this is the stereotypical person I want. I want this dude to be massive and go it from that perspective. So I did everything I could within the letter of the law, like what I was saying, in terms of not going in it bullishly and looking at it going from that perspective. So in conclusion for this episode, or what you can take from it, is number one, is obviously, like I said towards the end of the episode, don't be bullish. Look to take a step back in the circumstance that you're within, and look at that analogy that I use with the sky versus the sea and vice versa, and look at it and look to take from it what you will, and look to obviously implement it within your life and be very conductive of that and going forward. Thirdly, is to look at what is actually motivating you. What is the driving factor for you continuing on this journey? Is it one of, obviously, internal motivation, self-belief, etc.? Or is the external motivator dictating to you where you want to go within sport, be it all the accolades that come with it, and you've kind of lost your way? So it is finding that position where you find it. There's nothing wrong with being externally motivated, because everybody's been there at one point in time. But if you can find yourself nearer to putting that needle in the middle, or maybe swaying it more towards the inner belief, you're not going to waver in terms of that when that motivation actually goes. It's because what I was talking about with the three words. If the passion is there, you would do it no matter what the outcome, the process, and the reward is going to be. You would do it for you. So if you can remember those three points that I've said on actual summary of the episode, I think it will put you in a great place. If you like this episode, please do share it with your friends, and do let me know what you thought of the episode by tagging me over on Instagram at James O. Roberts 11, and again you can do the same on Twitter and Facebook. And as always, again, do check out my free content at fitamputee.co.uk/free-resources. Make sure to check that out. The links will be in the description. You can find all the show notes at mindsetgame.lipson.com under the category General. So once again, thanks for listening, and I'll catch you next week for another episode of the Mindset Athlete Podcast.